This game is wild. Super Mario Sunshine, released in 2002 for the Nintendo GameCube, would serve as a follow-up to Mario 64. Obviously, due to 64's success, it was inevitable that the next home console would see its very own Mario adventure. But the question wasn't if they would construct another 3D entry, it was how. How do you follow up Super Mario 64? You know, the game that single-handedly jump-started the 3D collectathon genre and spawned many other memorable experiences, such as Banjo-Kazooie? Well, you see, it's almost as if Nintendo was aware that making a direct sequel may not work out, so they decided to go in a completely different direction, and I mean completely different. Enter Super Mario Sunshine. This is surely one of the most interesting Mario games to talk about. For starters, the plot here is actually different from every other Mario game released up to that point. Rather than Peach getting kidnapped immediately, their plane crashes and you have to go inspect the area. This is where we are introduced to FLUDD, this game's main gimmick. Now FLUDD here is quite divisive among fans, much like the game itself. He serves many functions, each of which stemming from his many different nozzles. The two standard ones included the regular nozzle, which can clean graffiti off the island, as well as stunning or damaging enemies, and the hover nozzle, which grants a few extra seconds of airtime in order to reach faraway platforms. I personally like this addition due to the fact that most platforms in Mario Sunshine are unusually far apart. Thus, using the hover ability can actually come in great use when trying to reach a specific surface. There's also the turbo nozzle and rocket nozzle, both which go incredibly underutilized. The turbo nozzle can boost Mario across any surface at an alarming rate, whereas the rocket nozzle grants insane height but uses a lot of water. There is a ton of missed potential here, as these two nozzles are used to mainly find shines in this game's hub world, Delfino Plaza, rather than the actual levels. On the rare occasion that they do show up in a regular stage, there is a severe lack of actual obstacles to tackle or secrets to find them. You also can't even use these until around halfway through the game, by which point you would have already completed a few main stages in the game, and might not even feel like going back to those levels just to use the nozzles to grab one or two shines at most. Yet another area where this game differs heavily from its predecessor is its progression. Where in Super Mario 64, you were free to tackle any objective in any order you wanted, Mario Sunshine requires some of the most linear type of progression imaginable. You can still do a few worlds out of order, but for example, if you collect 3 shines, Rico Harbor is able to be unlocked. However, you may be able to finish Rico Harbor first. You simply have to go back to Bianco Hills though at some point in order to collect the remaining shines. There are 8 main levels within each world, but 7 of these are required to complete the game. You must play all the way till episode 7 and chase down Shadow Mario in every world, otherwise you cannot beat Super Mario Sunshine. And while this may not look terrible, it absolutely works to this game's detriment. There are a few levels that are just excruciating to complete, but since they are absolutely required, if a player gets stuck or too frustrated with a certain level, they have zero choice in skipping said level. This can lead to many players just giving up and deciding to quit because the game just gets too upsetting. It also doesn't help that Mario Sunshine has some of the worst level design I've ever seen in the Mario franchise. Before I go over the good, I'm gonna get the bad out of the way, so be prepared because I'm about to unleash some of my inner hate towards the game. So yeah, we talked about the progression system, but how about the levels themselves? Well, between the 7 main worlds in the game, very few of them have consistently enjoyable design. Bianco Hills, the first world in the game, is a pretty great start. Jumping right in, you can slide down this area and immediately start messing around. Though the game is very linear by progression, the actual worlds themselves aren't. There's a lot of things to just run around and explore. Granted, it will almost never lead to any discovery other than a blue coin, but it can still be fun to jump around and play with all the new moves you can pull off with Mario. The Onko Hills contains a respectable area for the player to get accustomed to the different enemies, and new design elements. For example, there's this absolutely brilliant part right here where the player is forced to make a few jumps, with each one getting more progressively challenging. On the third jump, you need to hover around these thorns, which is a great way of introducing the function and usage of the hover nozzle. It all culminates in a boss battle against PD Piranha, which sees the player using the regular squirt nozzle in order to defeat him. So yeah, an overall great start to the game, but we're just getting started. Every world in the game except for the very last one, Pianta Village, contains 0 bottomless pits for Mario to fall into. This may sound like it makes the game easier in theory, but it only serves to make things much more agonizing. Rico Harbor is particularly guilty here, as it's incredibly vertical, so failing to land a certain jump means falling all the way down into the water below, which requires slow and tedious movement to get back on land and completely restart the challenge. So rather than making 1-ups a concern, your mental sanity is now the greater threat, because the more you fail, the more you'll feel like ripping your hair out. Serena Beach is a very hated level in general. Besides looking absolutely gorgeous, the entire thing just feels like one big maze that can be extremely tedious to navigate. In the third mission, titled Mysterious Hotel Delfino, the player is required to bring Yoshi a pineapple, which is the one fruit the hotel doesn't have lying around. Convenient. You have to take this incredibly specific path through the place in order to find the pineapple, which I would honestly be impressed if anyone managed to do this without using a guide on their first playthrough. Then there's the casino section and, I don't even know where to begin. This is a complete train wreck. It can take upwards of 45 minutes to get through this portion because it all relies on luck. You need to match 3 sevens to each other, twice. But oh, you thought you were done? Well, buckle in because this is where the real fun starts. Oh my lord, to say matching all these tiles to each other made me go a bit insane would be quite the understatement. I've played and beaten Mario Sunshine a million times, but this part always ends up wasting a half hour of my life away. How did Nintendo greenlight this? Seriously. But this actually ends up leading to a secret stage, which I'm going to talk about next. First off, I find it incredibly jarring to go from one environment, such as a pier, directly into a level themed with 8-bit Mario wallpapers. However, I actually really like these stages. I mean, for starters, just listen to that a cappella rendition of the Super Mario Bros. Theme. It's immaculate. But on top of that, these are the only areas in the game where Mario doesn't have his FLUDD pack. All this time, the player has ingrained in their minds that they will always have their water jetpack as a handicap whenever they are in danger. So taking it away so suddenly actually crafts an interesting situation here. Not only do you not have your own form of safety, but now you have to face some of the hardest challenges in the game. These can truly be daunting, and it's the only time where 1-ups actually become important, as getting a game over means restarting the entire process of reaching that special stage. Mario also doesn't have the long jump in this game, so you really are left with the only option left, being creative. Mario's moveset this time around is incredible and extremely fun to pull off. Therefore, in these special stages, if you took the time to master such techniques as a spin jump, it can actually form a great change of pace and grant a rewarding challenge. In my opinion, to this day, Mario Sunshine still has the most consistently enjoyable form of movement in any Mario game. Sure, Odyssey offered a great level of variety, but to me, nothing beats going crazy with the spin jump and water diving technique across every level. Now, as I mentioned earlier with the a cappella soundtrack from the special stages, I want to talk about the rest of the music crafted for this game, and it's honestly pretty great. Each world has a very suiting theme for its respective environment. Rico Harbor, for example, sounds exactly like how you would expect a pier to sound, and Gelato Beach's theme literally couldn't sound more like a song you'd hear playing at the beach. This should be seriously played on giant speakers at every beach, it's just that fitting. There's also the sky and sea theme, which I hear almost no one ever bring up, but it's my personal favorite song in the game. This is what you hear whenever you enter an area such as the Sandbird level. It feels so surreal and makes you feel like you're in some sort of dream whenever you enter a stage with this theme. And the levels with this song are just plain weird. For example, they usually end up taking place in some sort of object literally floating randomly in the sky. One second, it'll be in some old guy's glass bottle, another time, it'll be in a poisonous river, or a literal pachinko machine. Super Mario Sunshine is just weird all around. It's not hard to see why this is the black sheep of the 3D Mario series. It's like everything has been recreated to eerily familiarize you to what we've come to know from the traditional games, such as the enemies and characters. Many characters seem to resemble a past baddie, such as Koopas or Goombas, but they are stylized in a totally different way and usually have completely unique movesets. And as for the characters themselves, Mario games are known for having wacky and goofy designs for each inhabitant, but what makes things particularly weird this time around is you never see any of these characters in any other mainline Mario game, so it feels especially unique. The only exception is the Piantas, which you see very briefly in one of the levels in Super Mario Galaxy 2. Speaking of which, I love how much personality these guys have. A lot of them are complete jerks, but they are a totally new addition to the franchise, and it's cool to see another species that isn't from the Mushroom Kingdom. And along with all the funky new enemies and characters, we get a totally new art style, which holds up so beautifully even today. Everything is stylized in such a bright and vibrant way, with pastel clearly being the main asset here. One of my favorite touches from this game that is completely genius is this heat wave effect given off when Mario is far away from an NPC. This heat wave makes it appear as though there are faraway characters that are moving, but in reality, their entire model is frozen in order to save space. It was absolutely brilliant and adds such a cool feel to the game. Another neat touch is how you can see other parts of the world from whichever stage you're in. For example, here in Pianta Village, you can see Pinna Park and Gelato Beach. Meanwhile, in Bianco Hills you can see Rico Harbor. This adds an incredible amount of cohesion to the game and truly makes the game feel like one big map, rather than taking place in separate sub-areas, which is why I find the special levels to be so odd, because it completely breaks the cohesive world design. You never see something like this in any of the other 3D Mario games, so it makes Sunshine stand out even more. Another thing that makes Sunshine stand out even more is the voice acting. Those absolute mad lads decided to put full-on voice lines into a Mario game, and yup, it goes exactly like how you'd expect it to. FLUDD sounds like the evil version of Kermit the Frog, Peach doesn't seem to take anything seriously, and then Bowser. Bowser. It was a pretty terrible decision by Nintendo to do this, so I think it's probably for the best that they completely scrapped the voice acting in all the subsequent Mario games. It just doesn't work for Mario like it does for Zelda, and even then some people might argue that it doesn't fit Zelda either. However, back to the game itself, one thing I'd like to compliment is the hub world. I mean, come on, everybody loves Delfino Plaza. There's a wealth of things to do here, such as finding shines, and speaking to all sorts of different Piantas. You can also randomly enter some secret levels, such as this one, just by blasting with the turbo nozzle between these two cops. Something else I love is how you can clean this giant shine, and once you do, it appears clean in every cutscene. A small but nice detail. Sunshine is also rife with glitches, so much so that it's actually hilarious. There are so many game-breaking bugs here that just adds up to this game's charm, and frustration. It's like 3/4 of the way to being a nicely polished game, but Nintendo decided to skip out right at that last portion needed to make this a relatively smooth experience. But honestly, after receiving games such as 3D World and Odyssey, which are so insanely polished, it can actually be quite fun to look back at Sunshine and recognize it for being the flawed mess that it is. And nowhere is this more clear than the final level. This is by far the most underwhelming final challenge in the series. It's difficult, for all the wrong reasons. Everything here is an insta-kill, which flies in the face of the concepts seen in other levels, which hardly ever had any obstacles even nearly as detrimental as these spikes or fire platforms. And do I even need to mention the boat? I mean, seriously, what even happened here? Controlling this thing has got to be the most confusing thing I have ever attempted in a video game. It just flat out doesn't make any sense. And the final fight is also pretty underwhelming. It's okay, I guess, but it strikes this awkward middle ground between an actual fight and some sort of chase sequence. All you need to do is use a strong ground pound on all these platforms while Bowser breathes fire at you, and Bowser Jr. throws out bullet bills, which can actually be quite surprisingly annoying. But after that, it's the end of the game. Already? Yeah, Super Mario Sunshine is a very short game, at least compared to the other Mario games. You can literally beat this in a day or two if you really want, but that's honestly one of my favorite things about Sunshine. It doesn't pride itself with a long runtime, rather its cohesive theming, and extensive moveset, which has spawned countless impressive speedruns that are still being attempted to this day. This is hands down the best and worst Mario experience for so many reasons. It has such a memorable theme, with great levels, and FLUDD is a fascinating concept exclusive to only this game. However, so many concepts attempted in Mario Sunshine fall flat on their face, such as the underutilization of FLUDD nozzles and wonky level design. This game had so much untapped potential, and I think if given enough time and care, it could have easily been one of the most fully realized Mario games. Instead, what we're left with is a respectable, but very flawed experience. Granted, a very fun experience, but with great fun comes great anger when it comes to Super Mario Sunshine. If you really want, you can skip out on this game, as it really isn't anything too incredible. However, I would definitely recommend giving it a playthrough, because if anything, playing Mario Sunshine will only make you appreciate the other titles even more. Just don't go for all the blue coins, I swear the prize you unlock for it is not worth it. Well anyways, thank you all for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.